Hello, welcome to Thursday's ITV News Meridian.
Tonight's headlines in the southeast. A standoff at sea. P&O Ferries fires 800 staff as unions tell workers stay on board.
They've been sacked by email. They've been sacked by Microsoft Teams. Support the seafarers.
As passengers are stranded at Dover, we have the moment staff are given the news filmed on a mobile phone.
Therefore, I am sorry to inform you that this means your employment is terminated with immediate effect on the grounds of redundancy.
Also tonight, the legendary Flying Scotsman steams into Edenbridge, a welcome sight for steam enthusiasts.
And the colours and signs of spring, the 100-year-old magnolias and rhododendrons in bloom. Good evening. P&O Ferries today fired 800 workers, many on the Dover-Calais route, and is attempting to replace them with cheap agency labour.
But the fire and hire tactics have triggered a tense standoff, with replacement workers bussed into Dover, while existing staff are ordered by union leaders to stay on board the ferries.
Well, P&O recorded a loss of £100 million in the last year. It says it's the only way to survive and that redundancy packages are generous. Well, Tony Green reports on an extraordinary day that began with the shock announcement that P&O Ferries was suspending its services.
You've lost the jobs, mate! Support the workers!
Protest at the port. P&O crew members demonstrate in Dover, an improvised protest in response to what was clearly a staged managed sacking.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere. All we want is our jobs back. We shouldn't have been sacked on Zoom or Teams, whatever it was. We want our jobs back. We don't want redundancy payments.
Rewind a few hours and this is how P&O's hundreds of staff at Dover were told via video link that they had lost their jobs.
The company has made the decision that its vessels going forward will be primarily crewed by a third-party crew provider. Therefore, I am sorry to inform you that this means your employment is terminated with immediate effect on the grounds of redundancy.
Absolute devastating. You know, we've had people in here crying today, young children that they've come in with, mortgages, thought they had a future in the maritime industry. Here's the reality when the politicians and government take their eye off what's going on in the maritime sector.
The news had been hinted at early this morning when the company said it would be making a major announcement, but it was not going into liquidation. Later, it had revealed it had made a difficult but necessary decision and said in a statement, in its current state, P&O Ferries is not a viable business. We've made a £100 million loss year on year, which has been covered by our parent, DP World. This is not sustainable. Our survival is dependent on making swift and significant changes now. Without these changes, there is no future for P&O Ferries. I caught up with a steward on the Spirit of Britain just a short while after he was told he would be replaced by a cheaper worker.
Devastated. I loved the job. It was my dream job. Career at sea. It was shocking as well because we were preparing up for the Easter rush and there was a sort of good vibe on board that we're going to it's getting busier, so the work's coming in. Didn't see this happening, not from my point of view anyway, from where I was.
Ahead of the announcement, all of P&O's cross-channel ships were brought to Dover. Customers were told today's Dover and Calais sailings would no longer run. Customers with tickets were instructed to contact ferry company DFDS.
At Dover, there's nearly 400 RMT members working on those vessels. There's probably another 50 or 60 around the country. But this is a major job loss for Dover and the Kent area. And it's an absolute outrage that the way that we've been through with P&O over the decades, the way that they stripped out jobs in the 80s, and the way that they're doing it again now under DP World is a flagrant abuse of workers.
P&O Ferries said it would be compensating seafarers for the lack of advance notice with enhanced compensation packages, and that it was securing the future viability of the business, which it said employs an additional 2,200 people and supports billions in trade in and out of the UK. It wanted to continue serving customers in a way that they have demanded from them for many years. It's a huge blow for one of the UK's leading ferry companies, which before the pandemic carried more than 10 million passengers a year, a substantial amount of freight, and provided a livelihood for hundreds of people in this town.
Tony Green there. Well, today's events came as a shock for the government too, and it's in urgent talks with P&O. In a moment, we'll catch up with our political editor, Phil Hornby, but first, Sarah Saunders is in Dover. Sarah, you've also spent the day there, and what about the workers? And we understand that many workers are still refusing to get off those ferries.
Yes, that's right. I think partly in shock, partly in protest. When they were told they lost their jobs, some of the workers refused to get off the ferries that you can see now moored up behind me. Now, I've just finished speaking to the RMT union, who say most of those have now got off. They were previously barricaded into rooms, and those who are still on board should be getting off in the next hour. Well, I'm joined by travel writer and correspondent with The Independent, Simon Calder. Simon, if we set aside how this was done for a moment, can you help to clarify why? We understand the company was losing money, but the parent company is doing very well.
It certainly is, but they stress that they haven't made a penny out of their operations here in the UK with P&O ferries. And I guess if you wanted to, you could date it all the way back to the opening of the Channel Tunnel, just 10 miles along the road from here in Folkestone. At that point, we thought all the ferries would sail off into the sunset. But of course, not only have they stayed, but we now have very robust competition with DFDS and Irish ferries up against P&O ferry on the short sea crossing to France.
Now, people will be very shocked by how this was done today. Were there alternatives?
Well, of course. I mean, all the way through the COVID pandemic, we've seen throughout the transport industry all kinds of, well, not quite fire and rehire, but just discussions with organisations like British Airways. Pretty much anybody working for BA now is on worse terms and conditions than they were 2 years ago. Of course, they really don't like it, and I don't blame them, but the unions were taking them through it all the way through. And suddenly to say, well, we're going to fire and not hire, we're just going to bring in cheaper workers, and we're going to effectively put the operation back up and running within a week without you lot is just, well, absolutely devastating from a personal point of view, but also I think completely implausible.
Simon, this feels like a very brutal decision that's been made today, but the workers and the unions are hoping it won't be finished. They'll be hoping for support from customers and from politicians. Is it the end?
Oh, I would be surprised if some accommodation wasn't found. There has just been universal outrage. Hugh Merriman, the chair of the Transport Select Committee, who represents Bexhill and Battle just down the coast, he is absolutely furious. So is the Transport Secretary. And I think some accommodation will be found, but it's been a terrible day for this very, very good long-standing company.
Simon, thank you so much. Well, workers have been given just till the end of the month to officially accept whatever redundancy deal they're given, but they've been told as part of that to hold their silence. So let me finish with the words that someone said to me today. We were a family on board these ships. It wasn't perfect, but I never thought that it would end like this.
Sarah in Dover, thank you.
Well, Sarah mentioned the politicians there. MPs have reacted with fury and disbelief about what P&O have done today. Let's go live to our political correspondent, Phil Hornby at Westminster. Just run us through what they've been saying, Phil.
Well, Matt, I've worked here a long time. Rarely have I known MPs from all sides of the House of Commons so united in, as you say, fury and disbelief and anger and anguish and outrage. They say what P&O has done today is shameful, insensitive and inhuman. Downing Street have got involved, saying what P&O have done is totally unacceptable. There's been an emergency statement in the House of Commons. But before we hear from that, let's hear from the MP for Dover.
Well, people who work in Dover are absolutely devastated, and this is just dreadful news for them and their families at this time. I mean, people have been loyal to P&O, have worked with P&O for decades. P&O has its head office in Dover. It's absolutely disgraceful the way they have behaved, and their owners, DP World, have just behaved in a really bad fashion.
The shipping minister has spent the afternoon in talks with P&O. Then he came to the House of Commons. This is what he said.
These are hard-working, dedicated staff who have given years in service to P&O. The way they have been treated today is wholly unacceptable. I am extremely concerned and frankly angry.
And Phil, what are Labour saying tonight?
Well, if Conservative MPs like Robert Courts are angry, Labour MPs are positively apoplectic tonight. They call it a national scandal. They've suggested in the House of Commons that what P&O have done might be illegal. There have been calls to ban P&O ferries from all UK waters until this matter gets resolved. And Labour say the government must take some share of the blame.
For far too long, this government has sat on their hands and chosen to side with bad bosses by failing to take action to outlaw fire and rehire. This is the cruel consequence of a decade of attacks on workers' rights.
And Simon Calder in Dover a few moments ago mentioned Hugh Merriman, the MP for Bexhill and Battle. He's also the chair of the Transport Select Committee here at Westminster, and this is what he had to say.
P&O, this once great flag carrier of the seas, have made an appalling error. If they do not reverse immediately and reinstate the employees and follow proper process, it's hard to see a way back from them commercially. The parent DP World needs to understand that the British public will not do business with companies who treat their employees with such contempt.
And he says if necessary, Parliament should pass emergency legislation to stop what's happening with P&O ferries. The government keeps saying tonight what's happened today is unacceptable. But the big question is, what are they going to do about it?
OK, Phil, for the time being, thank you very much indeed.
As we saw in our top story, some workers were told the news by video shown in offices. In relation to that announcement, P&O has just said this. All affected crew who worked today were notified face-to-face and in person on board their vessels.
Well, it also said for crew who were rostered off, P&O ferries made all efforts to notify them. Virtual meetings were held and they are being telephoned plus email. Other notifications as well were sent before dismissal letters and severance terms were shared via courier and email, they say. For any crew members we did not reach personally, this must have come as a shock and we apologise for this. Well, for more details on that P&O story and the rest of the day's news, of course, you can go to our website, the address as ever, itv.com/Meridian.
More of the day's news now. In London and South Eastern Railway has been fined more than £23 million for deliberately concealing taxpayer funding. In September last year, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps announced that the franchise would not be renewed after finding that the rail operator had concealed over £25 million. Today's fine is on top of £64 million the company already owes the government.
Gatwick Airport says that noise will increase when the South Terminal reopens later this month, but not to pre-pandemic levels. The terminal will reopen on the 27th of March after closing almost 2 years ago when COVID took hold of the country.
By the time we reach the 2019 traffic levels, so the number of flights we saw in 2019, probably won't be until 2024 or 2025. But because of the initiatives we've got in place, because of the fleet replacements, those newer, quieter types of aircraft that are being introduced, even when we get back to the same numbers of flights that we saw in 2019, the total noise will be lower than it was.
Now you're watching ITV News in the Meridian region, still to come on our programme.
We catch up with the world-famous steam engine, the Flying Scotsman, as it tours Kent.
And it's all starting to feel a lot like spring. How long will the fine weather continue? I'll be here with your full weather forecast.
Now, if you want to get in touch with us, you can, of course. We'd always love to hear from you. Details of how to do it is on the screen. And of course, don't forget to follow us on social media.
There's a warning that the number of evictions from privately rented properties could soar in the near future. It comes as the ban on evictions during the coronavirus crisis comes to an end and the cost of living begins to rise.
Well, in this evening's Tonight programme, Daniel Hewitt examines the private rental sector where thousands of people are living with the threat of losing their homes and landlords are owed thousands of pounds in rent arrears.
He also asks if the government could do more to help to stem the rising tide of evictions. We'll speak to him soon, but first, Kevin Ashford has this report.
This is my bedroom. Dawn Rudgewick-Brown has been privately renting for 9 years. In November, she was given a 2-month eviction notice from her 3-bedroom house and told her landlord wanted the property back.
I've never missed a payment. I've never been late with a payment on my rent for 9 years. And I had everything behind me. I had a guarantor, I had a deposit, I have a job.
With nowhere else to go, the council moved Dawn and her 2 children into a B&B.
I actually felt like I'd failed them. Like I'd done this for 9 years and I'd failed my kids.
There can be a price to pay too for landlords when tenants fall behind with their rent. Max has a mortgage on this property and is owed almost £15,000 in rent arrears and has had to go to court to get the bailiffs in.
Most landlords want tenants to come in and stay in a property for a very long time because it costs us money to replace tenants. You've got check-in fee, check-out fee, referencing. Nobody wants to flip tenants every 6 months. That's too expensive.
According to research seen exclusively by the Tonight programme, more than 200,000 rental households have either been served an eviction notice since June or expect one in the next 6 months. And 425,000 households are behind on their rent, with 2/3 saying that's because of COVID. Kevin Ashford, ITV News.
And let's cross to Daniel Hewitt, the reporter on tonight's programme. Dan, these numbers are fairly alarming. A lot of people either losing or facing losing their homes.
Yeah, really alarming. And we all know right now the cost of food, fuel, energy bills is all going up. And sadly, it's no different when it comes to rent. And if you couple that with the fact that up until last summer we had a ban on evictions because of the pandemic, that ban has now been lifted. And the experts in the sector say if you couple those things together, the cost of living crisis with the fact the pandemic eviction ban has been lifted, there is a warning that a tsunami of evictions could be on the way.
And we saw in our report there just the effect this is having on families.
It's having a huge effect, and it's no surprise when you look at the numbers. Rightmove shared data with the Tonight programme, and it shows that the average monthly rent now across the UK is £1,200 a month. That's gone up 10% in the last year. That is the quickest rise that Rightmove have ever recorded, and they started recording in 2010. And the problem here is that there's more competition than ever for private rental properties, so when people do get evicted or have to leave, there aren't that many alternatives. When you go to the council, they haven't got that many properties, so it's a real problem when you are evicted or if you have to leave your home.
But because it is the private rental sector, what can the government actually do?
Well, the government have been promising reforms in this area since April 2019. They've been promising one of their key reforms is to abolish what's called Section 21 notice, which is a no-fault eviction notice. So right now, landlords can effectively evict you within 8 weeks and don't have to give a reason. The government have been promising to get rid of that, but they've been doing that for 3 years. And I spoke to Michael Gove, the Housing Secretary, in this programme, and he still wasn't able to give us a date on this, which I think for a lot of renters watching this, is quite worrying.
OK, Dan, well, we will be watching tonight with interest. Thank you so much for talking to us. And you can see more from Losing Your Home, the true cost, tonight on ITV from the new time of 8:30.
Meanwhile, the ITV Evening News is, of course, on after us. With the details, here's Mary Nightingale.
Coming up on the programme, chaos on the ferries as P&O dramatically sacks 800 seafaring staff with immediate effect. With services cancelled for the coming days and some crew refusing to leave their ships, we'll ask what it means for customers.
Mummy! That's Mummy.
We'll have the latest as Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe is reunited with her family. And as the government looks to change the law on online safety, Charlie XCX tells us of her social media struggles.
When you're low or feeling down and you read something negative about yourself, obviously it amplifies and you zone in on it.
We have got a packed show for you tonight, so do join us in a few minutes' time.
Thank you, Mary. Now, when it comes to trains, there are few as famous or as well loved by rail enthusiasts as the Flying Scotsman.
Yes, the steam locomotive is fast approaching its centenary year, but just before it retires for a facelift to celebrate, it took a trip through Kent today.
Indeed, before making its way to Canterbury, it pulled into tiny Edenbridge station this morning, where Andy Dickinson was waiting.
It's perhaps no surprise that when a steam engine, soon to celebrate its 100th birthday, meets a modern commuter service, that the result is that it arrives close to an hour late. But few here were complaining, so eager were they to catch such a spectacle. Eden Bridge today to be the Flying Scotsman's watering hole on its way to Canterbury.
So Flying Scotsman itself would have done London to Edinburgh non-stop in about 6 hours, and picking up water through water troughs between the tracks, so it didn't actually have to stop like we are doing here at Eden Bridge today to put water in. It's had several owners who had problems with it. It got stuck in America. It's been all over the world, as you say, which most locos haven't. It just has something that way beyond any other locomotive, in total. It has a resonance that goes way beyond these shores. It's a genuine celebrity loco.
A darling of train spotters everywhere, this locomotive really is a legend of the track, setting 2 world records some 55 years apart. The first to reach 100 miles per hour in 1934 and a non-stop steam run of 422 miles in Australia in 1989.
I think it's just the icon. It's been looked after and kept running for many, many years. It's the beauty of the thing.
I think it's just steam trains in general. I remember them coming along at the bottom of our line when I was a little girl and seeing them going up, and they just look lovely in amongst all the trees. So the setting is gorgeous.
This was the Scotsman's penultimate trip before an overhaul in time for next year's centenary celebrations, still set to delight many more passengers and spectators further down the line. Andy Dickinson, ITV News, Eden Bridge.
Doesn't that just look stunning? That could have been a film or anything. Absolutely beautiful. Now, Matt and I were lucky recently to visit Board Hill Gardens in Sussex.
Yeah, talking of beautiful, that's also a lovely place to go.
It was really lovely, and it's even lovelier right now because there's a blaze of colour from all the camellias, magnolias and rhododendrons, and some of them are 100 years old.
Well, we sent Star reporter Malcolm Shaw to find out why spring has sprung particularly early this year.
A riot of colour on display at Board Hill Garden in Sussex. This first flush of spring is the result of a mild start to the year and an indication of our changing climate.
Our February is becoming much warmer, which just brings everything on. So we've got our magnolias, we've got our rhododendrons, we've got our camellias, all in flower together at one time, which is becoming almost the norm nowadays. This is Magnolia robusta coming from China. So we have magnolias from all over the world, flowering all together in one place, which is, really quite magnificent for anyone visiting the gardens.
Harry only came to Board Hill 4 months ago, but some of the specimens have been here since the early 1900s, gathered from across the world by the great plant collectors of the time.
This is Magnolia campbellii, and this has been planted here for about 100 years now, and it's reached a magnificent height of 60 foot. It flowered in about middle of February, and it's just starting to come to the end now after that rainfall last night. But it has these beautiful large pink saucer-shaped flowers, and against any blue sky it just looks absolutely magnificent.
The magnificent mansion is a stunning backdrop to the garden. Some of the plants here are quite unique.
This was bred at Board Hill. This is Camellia donation. That was bred 85 years ago to the month. And this was bred by one of our previous head gardener, Walter Fleming, between a Japanese and a Chinese species. And it's produced this wonderful, particularly large pink-flowered camellia, which is now sold all over the world because of its large, bright pink flowers.
Board Hill also boasts the best private collection of champion trees in the country, so called because of their exceptional size. But even the more modest plants are putting on quite a show. Malcolm Shaw, ITV News, Haywards Heath.
Lovely.
It's just blue skies. That's what we've all been talking about today. Holly's with us now. Holly, what do blue skies mean?
Well, I can tell you what they look like. Do you want to take a look now? Yeah. Because they have been gorgeous, haven't they? Here we go. This came in from Dean Spinks from Margate. Can you see just at the back a very thin line of cloud?
Yeah,
that is yesterday's.
Dean, that's some picture.
That is yesterday's weather front on its way out. So that's what brought all the rain that brought the Saharan dust yesterday. You can just see it there, exiting shot. Not a cloud in the sky here though, in Hastings. Peter Norman Chair, this, isn't it gorgeous? But I want to tell you something else about today, because today is something called the equinox. Now that means equal light, and it's when you get exactly, or nearly exactly, the same amount of daylight and darkness. So your days and nights are equal length.
So not the equinox.
No.
Different.
See, well, do you know, we do say, oh, the equinox is when your days and nights are equal length. But it's actually not quite true, and that's because, so the equinox is when your sun is directly above the equator, and everywhere on the globe gets roughly 12 hours of daylight, but we measure it from when the sun is halfway up, so the middle of the sun comes up above the equator, to when the sun is halfway down and the middle of the sun is halfway through sunset. So you actually get a bit more, you two are laughing at me, a bit more
we're not
sunlight
sciencey like
on
you.
the equinox than just 12 hours. So today is the day where you get almost exactly 12 hours of sunlight, and so from here on out our days are getting longer than our nights.
So today's the real equinox.
Sort of.
Right.
Yeah, sort of.
We talked this through at lunchtime, we've rehearsed it twice and I still don't really get it, so let's just get the forecast. Here's Holly.
Feels like home, whatever the weather. Valent Boilers and Heat Pumps sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
Lovely bright skies overhead for today, and there's more where that came from. More sunshine in store, some chilly nights, I think you'll notice that tonight, a bit of mist and fog as well, and then on Sunday, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we could well see some showery bits and pieces of rain. So high pressure dominating for the time being. We do start to pick up more of a breeze, I think, and then yes, on Sunday a weather feature heads our way, and that could well bring some showery bits and pieces of rain, although some uncertainty about the exact detail and timing on that. At the moment then, starry skies, a couple of things happening, temperatures falling away, and there's chance of some mist and fog forming too. So I do think some of us, especially in the countryside, could well see a frost forming tonight. But a bright start as we head into tomorrow. Chilly, some mist and fog around, but some sunshine to be had, especially once that mist and fog clears. It should become lovely and bright once again. But we've got a shift in wind direction. It's more of a northeasterly for tomorrow, so that north Kent coast will feel chillier, whereas for parts of Sussex, I think it will feel that bit warmer, probably quite noticeably. More sunshine to be had on Saturday. Sunday, I think there's risk of some showery rain, but actually quietening down and hopefully some bright weather into the beginning of next week. Take care.
Valent sponsors ITV Meridian Weather.
Now that is it from us for this evening, but just to say on Holly's behalf, it's a worm moon this evening and we want your photographs. I don't know what that is either.
I don't know what a worm moon is. I can't even say it, but I'll be back here with your late news. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.